Everything seemed to be okay. Seeing Shi Yian's joy when he finished killing someone, Boza was so scared that he couldn't move his legs. He used to be a nurse saving people but saw another person kill someone quickly. Like that, how can she accept it? Shi Yian ignored it, not happy to call, "Sister, we don't have time to do ideological work, is it okay? Or do you want to?" Having said that, Shi Yian left the sentence unfinished to let her understand for herself, but it seemed like she still couldn't stand up, so she had to stick the muzzle of the gun in Boza's face and repeat. Or did she also want to die like the rest of them? Quite a distance away, 2 feet wearing the same boots and clothes appeared in front of a church made of stone. A man inside spoke. "I don't think we could find this place in Korea. If Peck really hid in here, we wouldn't be able to find him." In front of them was the Michael Church, built in an old style, an undercover agent of the Chan Yunhua ship with a distinctive bun hairstyle. Looking at the person next to you calling Hijacking, are you not afraid of implicating others by doing so? Why care? Undercover number 2 frowned. Those guys will definitely send soldiers here soon. They whispered to each other about the Japanese who were also coming, and then the snotty-nosed Europeans like Britain and Germany would all be here anyway. Hijacking nodded. There are also a few more middle-class mobs rushing to loot, so we have to arrange a large force to deal with it when necessary. Currently, the numbers here probably overwhelm all forces, so they are extremely confident. Suddenly, the sound of light footsteps rang out, making both of them cautiously look forward. From the side of the stone church, a man walked out with a calm expression with his hands in his pockets. When he saw the group of people in front of him, he curled his lips and smiled, but the smile clearly had a deadly meaning, as if he was ready to threaten anyone who came here. As soon as they saw that person, the Chinese spies could only scream, and then blood was splattered on the green grass. The ground had many holes, and that strange name seemed not to know that he was the one who created the scene below. Hijacking, his face covered in blood, tried to get up and escape but couldn't. Finally, he fell face down and died right on the grass. While on the roof of the stone church in the distance, under the bright moonlight, was the strange orange-clothed guy from earlier, holding Yunhua's shirt, who had also died tragically. At the Capital Defense Command, the radio was now reporting that the entire defense force of the capital along both sides of the Han River had completely fallen, and a few groups of professionally trained soldiers had assassinations all over the city. Zhang Hu simply asked the other end of the line, "Have you guys prepared anything?" That person replied, "We have prepared concentrated firepower at the coordinates of the greenhouse. Everyone is ready to wait for orders." Zhang Hu nodded. It seemed they were ready to respond. Meanwhile, the unlucky soldier Han Ji-hun kept tapping his foot on the ground restlessly, wondering why they didn't do anything. Why until now there was still no evacuation order? There's not much time left from here until midnight. I rubbed my chin and thought, who am I in this crowd of people? I'm a hostage, so how can a hostage walk freely like me? Oh wait, suddenly hearing Se-young walk out, he felt like it didn't matter whether he was free or not. When he went outside, he simply said, "Let's go." Where we're going is still a long way off, as if he wanted to leave Han Ji-hun confused. The army van driven by Han Ji-hun was quickly discovered by the army, and Tak Se-young left the greenhouse. After driving for a while, Han Ji-hun still hasn't received an order from this big guy, doesn't know where to drive, but it's like he read his mind and replied, "Go straight, do it for me." The pilot immediately showed an apricot face and nodded repeatedly in agreement. Whether said or not said, looking at Se-young makes me feel scared. But why do people still walk normally on both sides of the road? Even going out to play like on a weekend night, maybe they didn't know or the warning system wasn't working. The problem lies in the evacuation. This teenager has already taken down the greenhouse. My gods. This is not the time to play around with him. At that moment, Se-young turned around and said, "Over there." So the car kept moving within sight of the helicopter, watching them every minute. According to the current direction, the officer reported, Tak Se-young seemed to be going to the Parliament building. The commander of the Capital Defense Ministry had a headache. Why did he choose the Parliament building to approach? There was not a single soldier there. At that moment, he heard an urgent voice from the radio reporting that Tak Se-young's direction was not to the Parliament building, making him startled. It turned out that the place he wanted to go was a long-standing complex building of the national television station, inside which there was a commotion because they urgently needed to deliver the news that Tak Se-young was aiming for the building. Parliament House. There are only 3 seconds left until the broadcast, and the reporter will follow the script and introduce herself as Ju Young to update the latest news about Tak Se-young. Before she could finish speaking, the curtain behind her broke with a loud bang, causing everyone present in the studio to gasp. Everyone stared in that direction with only one thought: there was only one person in this world who rushed into this place. Just as they predicted, Tak Se-young aggressively walked straight into the middle of the studio with eyes ready to kill everyone there one by one. He glanced back and gave Jin-hun an order with just one word: "Go," making him jump, rushing out of the hole that Se-young had just created to go to the filming director. Even secretly but clearly the whole studio heard. Se-young wanted the news about her breaking into the TV station to be broadcast everywhere. He was like, hello, he didn't understand anything. Then he heard Han Ji-hun hastily repeat himself, pointed the camera at it and broadcast it right away. "Grandpa, don't you want to see me die or something?" Old man Yeon-jong somehow miraculously returned unharmed, listening to his subordinates report that because he returned late yesterday, he did not know what happened in Seoul. Tak Se-young took over the greenhouse yesterday. All the government and politicians including Jang Jong-hoo were evacuated. The old man turned around and looked at his subordinates but did not say anything. It was difficult for that boy to predict what he wanted to do. Walking on the busy street, he asked the subordinates behind him, "How was Muyeon?" As soon as he sat in the car, his subordinates reported that he had regained consciousness and had been injected with a lot of nutrients, so he recovered very quickly. Sitting in the car, the two of them continued to talk. "So have you found Seonghwa yet?" "Briefly, it seems like that person intentionally didn't answer my phone." The subordinate took out a piece of paper and said he had something to give to him. He handed Yeon-jong 3 samples containing part of the essence stolen from the Kukiwon laboratory, and the camera confirmed that it was clearly Seonghwa. "It's interesting, the person I was looking for appeared to steal something I spent money on." Following behind Se-young, Han Ji-hun still couldn't understand why this teenager was so aggressive towards innocent people. They didn't do anything to him, in fact, when they first asked why they had to evacuate the whole city. "I thought this kid did the right thing, but now why is Se-young threatening residents who have nothing to do with me? Is it just to take revenge on the government? But in that case he could just show up at the government and ask for what he wanted." Looking at Se-young's taciturn expression, he guessed that this guy was venting his anger. Reaching out to press the elevator button, Han Ji-hun felt confused with a bunch of questions, then finally called out to Se-young behind him, "Are you going to go back to the greenhouse?" He said no, he had to go get the helicopter first. An unexpected step. Ji-hun did not understand but still had to follow. Putting his index finger on the button for the stairs to go up, when the elevator door opened, he was startled to realize there was someone else inside. Se-young also tilted her head to see who it was, dressed so strangely as if it was raining heavily outside. Behind the loose yellow hat is a head of blue hair smiling as if enjoying it. Assuming it was someone from the station, Han Ji-hun quickly whispered to him to get out of here or die. Who would have thought Se-young wouldn't say a word, just walked in without hitting him but simply stood in the elevator like any normal person, ignoring Han Ji-hun who kept whispering to the other person, "Why did I ask you to come out? You don't come out?" The elevator door closed. Neither of these two had any special attitudes, which surprised Ji-hun, or maybe both of these generals were blind. The strangest thing was that the famous Tak Se-young was clearly standing in front of us but didn't show any signs of fear or action. "Wait, why doesn't anyone dial the floor number on the control panel?" He turned his head to look at the guy in the yellow shirt and then looked at Tak Se-young. If the other person didn't dial the number, he should have walked out as soon as the elevator door opened, right? Standing behind Se-young, that person smiled happily as if something very funny was happening and then pulled out a white test tube from somewhere. He put it on his neck and injected it into his bloodstream. "That's right, those are the actions of experienced people. No normal person would do that." Ji-hun opened his eyes wide looking at the veins running from the heart mark to the other person's face, but he still smiled like he was very happy. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the elevator changed dramatically, as if that person was evolving into something strange, which the smile behind that cloak made Se-young discover. As soon as he turned his head, he saw someone jump up and use one leg to hit his chest, causing his large body to throw his chest back and hit the elevator door. As soon as he saw the teenager's face fall slightly forward, his other leg quickly swung up and kicked Se-young straight in the chin, causing him to throw his face up high. Song-ae, as quick as lightning, changed his stance and gave another blow to his raised chin. Without waiting for Se-young to have any time to protest, he took another blow to the top of his head with a clear boot sound. Kneeling to the floor with his fists clenched on the elevator floor, the other guy quickly backed away from Se-young, making Han Ji-hun not know what to say. What just happened? Did this guy just knock out Se-young? Bluehair thought he had defeated this giant and was smiling confidently, but suddenly saw the boy in front of him sighing like a fly was bothering him. Looking closely at Se-young's every action, he saw nothing different, just stood up and stared at the name in front of him. Holding out his right hand, Se-young quickly ran towards the place, but the other guy was too fast. He had already pinched the right side and swung a kick with the other leg into Se-young's face, hearing the sound of a boot. That blow to his eye should have destroyed the eyeball, but it only temporarily had the effect of angering him. Looking at the cheeky smile of the name below, Se-young without saying a word just rushed towards the blue-haired guy. The two rushed to fight each other right in front of Han Ji-hun, making him so scared that he didn't dare move. With a weight no different from two bulls, the last elevator cable could no longer bear it and kept heaving. 3 wires broke quickly, causing the elevator to fall uncontrollably downwards, the walls squeaking against both sides of the wall. Temporarily slowing down, the elevator fell without stopping, accompanied by Ji-hun's miserable screams. He was the only one feeling scared, but these two people still considered each other as enemies without blinking an eye. It's a pity that the soldier didn't know which step he took when leaving the house the day before on duty. When it reached the last floor of the building, floor B3, the elevator hit the ground with a terrible noise and then emitted smoke like a giant bowl of incense. From there, he saw Se-young being punched out and carrying 2 metal doors with him. He slid his 2 big, strong legs to the ground to close his body without losing much of his balance. I just felt irritated and raised my head to see who it was. That guy continued to rush out of the elevator and rushed towards Se-young at an extremely terrible speed. He happily jumped up and swung his strong calves, his eyes never leaving Se-young at all. Se-young was the same, neither man would give in to the other. They just rushed to fight each other while the pilot kept holding his head and groaning like he had a fever, but he couldn't understand if those two guys were the same. Not human, but if not human, then what is it? Looking at Se-young, he looks quite human. The other man also looks like a human, but the strength of both and the speed that the blue-haired guy is swinging through the corners of the building are not things normal people can do. Se-young squinted his eyes to follow every move of the other person, not sure if he could keep up, but that blue-haired guy was no different from a ball, bouncing loudly from the floor to the ceiling and then through the walls in the basement as if he was shooting. Play catch with Se-young. As soon as he turned his eyes to look back, he jumped forward, and then as soon as he turned his head forward he jumped back, wanting to take advantage of the opportunity to catch this brat. Just when he thought he was about to beat this guy, Se-young's big, strong hand suddenly grabbed his neck. Without even turning his head to look, he spoke up, "There's something I have to tell you. First, I have an appointment today." Who knows, just know that Se-young's arms tightened tighter and tighter on the other person's neck. Only then did he discover where the sword on this big guy's back had gone. Just as he asked himself that question, Se-young's sword appeared next to that person and sped away from the right wing, leaving the blue-haired boy with no way to escape in time. When the dragon brought the other person to the wall emitting smoke, Se-young let go and glanced in that direction. That person was pinned to the stone wall of the basement by a sword sticking from his right arm through his chest, covered in a large area of blood. Only when he followed Se-young's command to pull it out did that body collapse. He didn't bother to look anymore, just ignored it and walked back to Han Ji-hun, who was now sweating profusely. Let's go, it's as simple as that, but he doesn't know how to say it properly. As he quietly followed Se-young, he turned his head and continuously looked at that name. A moment after the two left the basement, the blue-haired man tilted his head back and gurgled several times as if his throat had been cut off by some magical force, still reaching into his pocket. Pulling out a pink syringe and injecting it straight into the place where the medicine was injected earlier with a smile that couldn't be more strange. Upon reaching the rooftop, Han Ji-hun, looking at the current situation, could guess that the people at this TV station had boarded a helicopter and disappeared from this place. The helicopter landing pad is currently empty and there is not a single person in sight. It was reported that Se-young kept mumbling something, but the helicopter made Han Ji-hun not know where to pull him out. Why are you telling me that? Did I make one for you or something? Just as he was looking at the young man with extreme discrimination, Ji-hun saw Se-young pointing to the sky and saying, "I will take that helicopter." Following the direction he pointed, the pilot squinted his eyes and raised his hand until he heard the clicking sound coming from the propeller above. It was a helicopter to monitor Se-young's movements. At this time, they were also looking down below and wondering to each other, "Hey, is that guy standing next to Se-young's henchman? Why is something so strange? Those two people just keep staring at me." If they discovered themselves at this height, they were partly curious to know what the other two were doing. Although they did not lower their altitude, they moved closer so they could look down with their binoculars. Ji-hun found a piece of paper with the words, "Descent," so they brought it out and asked each other, "Why'd I have to go down? When will I commit suicide if I go down there? Who has the free time to go down to me? That monster?" The other person had just nodded and suddenly they both turned to the left when they heard the strange whirring sound of the wind, discovering that the lightning sword was pointed at the pilot's face. Looking down again, the two now understood why Han Ji-hun had brought down the sign here. It was very simple, he had a security guard next to him. A moment later, the helicopter quickly landed on the rooftop of the television station building, leaving the two main pilots and co-pilots standing and watching the plane. No matter how neatly they stole it, they were still imprisoned. Still hanging on the left side of the helicopter, Se-young said the next place Han Ji-hun needed to drive to was the nearest bridge. Damn the bridge at this hour, Ji-hun doesn't understand, what about the people, but he has no choice. He can only fly a helicopter to take Se-young to the nearest bridge. His head was full of wondering why this kid didn't just go to the army and punch each other. Heading straight towards Mapo Bridge, the government quickly received news that Se-young had just hijacked the helicopter and attacked into the inner city. That's enough for robbery. Who would want a helicopter from him? What everyone wants to know is why did he hijack the helicopter? Just as she was about to report the error, the secretary was stunned as if she had forgotten to report, causing Jong-hoo to ask, "What's the matter with you?" The secretary looked pale and stammered for a while before trying to say, "Sorry, because a new report just arrived. Mapo Bridge has been confirmed to be completely destroyed." What? The crowd was in a commotion when smoke billowed out and blocked traffic on Mapo Bridge. Se-young's helicopter clattered above. After destroying the bridge, he was still staring at it as if he wanted to punch it a few more times. Poor Han Ji-hun was shaking like crazy when he realized he was one of the people who made Mapo Bridge become like this in just a few minutes. Knowing that Se-young did it alone, he still felt stunned. This young man told him to continue, making many cells in Ji-hun's body feel like they wanted to stop working. The news station that day continuously reported that Tak Se-young, the terrorist who illegally occupied the greenhouse and caused the deaths of countless civilians, is now going everywhere destroying bridges along the Han River. Suddenly someone came and whispered to the reporter. Not knowing what news it was, she looked very panicked when she turned back to inform everyone that there was now not only Mapo Bridge but also Seogang Bridge and Wonhyo Bridge also collapsed. Next, there were many images of Tak Se-young destroying the Gyeonghwa Bridge. And right now, live TV reports that Tak Se-young is currently sending planes to move to different bridges without stopping for a moment. Every time he reached the bridge, he would fly out of the helicopter and land somewhere on the road, slamming his fist down, causing people to run away, abandoning their cars and possessions to save their lives. The city that day, what was the river? Was this guy planning to destroy all the bridges of the Han River with his bare hands? In less than 10 minutes, he had already destroyed all 3 major bridges of the city. If so, what would happen to the people on the other side who were stuck? Se-young didn't care. He kept banging his hands on the bridge, causing broken concrete and bricks to fall around while he gritted his teeth, moving more and more from one hand to the other. He kept using his bare hands over and over again until the dust rose into a giant column and the sound of the bridge collapsing could be heard clearly. The TVs of all the people in Seoul City are currently showing the news that Tak Se-young is destroying bridges one by one, severely affecting traffic. At first, a normal family was completely indifferent. How much money would it cost to rebuild a bridge like that? Suddenly, the wife asked her husband, "Should we arrange to leave the city?" Their daughter did not agree. She had planned to meet her friends tomorrow, but with the roads and bridges destroyed like this, how could they meet? He also saw that his daughter was right, it was just that the traffic was a bit inconvenient. But in just a few seconds, when TV showed the current scene, the prisons in the city were in an uncontrolled state, and hundreds of criminals in prisons and detention camps had all escaped. People are currently extremely dissatisfied because no matter how many calls they make, the police still do not respond. It seems like the current situation is getting very bad. As parents, of course they understand what happens to criminals who escape from prison, but it seems like things are really bad out there. The whole family gathered to watch information on television warning all people to stay indoors and lock the doors tightly. The streets were filled with rioters fighting each other, robbing or committing other acts of violence in large groups. Currently, reporters have also received reports that many teenagers are participating in those groups to burn vehicles and stores to rob. It seems they realize that Tak Se-young's threat is so great that the government cannot perform its duties as well as usual. The girl saw that one of the people fighting on the street was her classmate, causing her parents to panic. According to our father, everyone should quickly go and collect their things. Our whole family will leave here before it's too late. The screen of the National Assembly is also currently showing reporters extremely disappointed when reporting that the city's security and confidence have completely collapsed. Politicians these days seem to have neck and shoulder pain, holding on to their boredom and moaning endlessly. They cannot stop the situation where residents are trying to escape from the Korean capital, and according to predictions, Seoul will eventually become the center of chaos. Even the experienced Jong-hoo, now still embracing "I'm so bored that I give up and don't know what to do right." After completing the city in less than half an hour, Se-young swung the helicopter back and landed right in front of the now empty greenhouse. Han Ji-hun walked down with a tense expression because when he turned around, he saw the entire capital on fire behind him. Only the land around the greenhouse was still lush, the rest of the city looked like it was being burned by a fire. Looking again at the taciturn teenager in front of him, he wondered if this was the Korea he wanted to live in? Is that really so? But of course Han Ji-hun didn't dare to ask. Just looking at Se-young was enough to make him scared. According to the secretary's current report, as soon as Tak Se-young's terrorist actions were confirmed, U.S. Ambassador Grant left the country and simply reported that he was evacuating under an emergency. Jong-hoo didn't say anything, but the commissioners roared with indignation. That guy flew out of the country at this crucial time. While America's ally is in danger, you have a reputation as an ambassador, but only think about yourself. Each person had a sentence. Then Junhop was so upset that he immediately pulled out his phone to call that party to ask for reason. Suddenly he stopped when Jong-hoo told him to wait. "I will be the one to call their side directly." At that time, people in the five-cornered cage were also having a meeting and were buzzing with images of Tak Se-young being transmitted. Many people think that this guy is mentally ill, but it's not really like that, so for the time being, we don't know what file this young man is in. To be honest, just by looking online, they already know that Tak Se-young's power is a completely different type from what they currently have. A blonde woman agreed. Currently no one can answer how strong Se-young's strength is. Opposite her was a blonde man giving a hypothesis. If this person belonged to our army, would we be able to answer? There was immediately a snicker in the room. How could anyone take my side? What method do you plan to use? The black commander sitting at the head of the table rejected the idea of using aggressive forces with high destructive power to bring Tak Se-young to his side. So the blonde lady informed everyone, because Pond protected his relatives, in return that young man agreed to help us with something when needed, whatever. The blonde man sitting opposite immediately interjected, "Why is there only one thing? Asking for so little. His relatives are American citizens, so it's natural that we have to protect them, but I suggest asking for something else." The commander spoke faintly, "We should know where our stop is. Tak Se-young killed his own country's president and took control of government buildings through violence. What if that didn't happen in Korea but happened right in Washington in the US? The man was very confident and smiled, saying that the Korean army was strong but compared to ours, it was a bit uneven. The laughter was interrupted. Based on your theory, if he really set foot in our country, do you think Se-young would do the same thing here? And if so, what are you planning to do? Perhaps he plans to drop nuclear bombs on his land? A long silence passed through all the politicians here until the door was opened from the outside. A young brother reports that General Chester Raleigh has just received direct instructions from the vice president to contact us. The black man wanted to know how the White House would respond, but it turned out that they told this blonde guy to report back, but they still haven't responded. So that's it. Everyone was waiting for information from the black man, so he was thinking hard, finally raised his eyebrows at the other person and ordered General Raleigh to withdraw as many troops as possible. The other person did not object, just asked if we should take all the devices back or not. Just stating the obvious, our America has an agreement with Tak Se-young, so we will withdraw as many soldiers as possible from this situation as soon as possible. So in the end, what is the answer for the vice president over there? Just ignore it, he replied, then seriously told everyone present, if we announce ourselves publicly, Korea will receive the information whether they want it or not. Instead of answering directly, we can minimize friction between the two sides in this indirect way. So the US Prime Minister immediately went on air to announce to the whole world, our mission is to protect the freedom and democracy of South Korea, and establish a relationship with South Korea. As an ally, we stopped North Korea's threats and attacks and protected the people of South Korea from war. As for a significant number of civilians, they died because of one person's grievance with the behavior of the Korean government being described as personal defense. We regret that we cannot get involved. Having said that, South Korea's politicians seem to have collapsed. Whether they like it or not, they still have to listen to the rhetoric behind it. This unwanted incident was not caused by outside forces invading country, so for us this is not a declaration of war. The US military only participates with the armed forces when there are threats from South Korea coming from outside, so in this case there is no need to act to cause misunderstanding between the two sides. The craziest thing is that Jong-ho called for help himself, which they are now openly and bluntly refusing. In conclusion, the US Prime Minister's side hopes that the US military's decision will be an opportunity for long-term cooperation with Korea in the near future. For every sentence that Prime Minister said, for relationships built on trust, he gritted his teeth. They kept repeating about this, that, and that strong friendship, making him even more crazy. Only more. At such a tense moment, someone rushes in and screams loudly, something big has happened. What's the big deal now? In short, it's still Tak Se-young. He continues to follow the Han River to the Olympic Expressway, encountering the army's defense line blocking the way to the capital. Jong-ho wanted to hear some better news, but in the end there was only one news: he destroyed the entire blockade to get through. The place where Se-young passed by, leaving behind a house full of burned people and dead people, viewed from the upper corner was no different from a group of ants affected by poison. Not even a single shiver was present. He just clung tightly to the plane and looked down below without any emotion, and had no intention of forgiving these guys. There was chaos inside the parliament building, because now was the best time for politicians to evacuate the affected central area. Jong-ho replied succinctly, "We can't retreat anymore." He bitterly realized, "We have to meet Tak Se-young face to face and talk to him." The plane stood suspended in the air while below was emitting streams of black smoke. As soon as Se-young's 10 out of 10 eyesight glanced over, she immediately saw a figure just getting off the limo on the road. In the city center. That person is Mr. Jun Hyo-bi, the current Prime Minister of South Korea, who is also the interim president, so he has the highest authority to talk to Se-young. He let go of the helicopter, straightened his legs and jumped down to the ground below. As soon as he landed, it created a shock and explosion sound and his face fell straight towards Junhop, causing a politicians like him have been so scared for so long that they can only dare to raise their hands to cover their faces. As soon as they saw Se-young land opposite, the reporters immediately filmed the scene for everyone to see. Now everyone can see that terrorist Tak Se-young and current interim president Lee Junhop have come face to face with each other to negotiate a possible way to stop the chaos in the city. Junhop did not come alone. He came with a walkie-talkie that was connected to someone at the parliament building. In a friendly manner, he introduced me as President Lee Junhop, but Se-young did not say anything. Didn't say a word, just frowned and looked at him, waiting to continue. Mr. Tak Se-young, is it time for you to stop now? His voice sounded trembling in helplessness. We have no way to stop you and don't have the resources to do so. All we can do is sit back and watch. Once you get here, the only thing we have is what can be done is to evacuate. But you, the one who caused all this, definitely know better than anyone else. Having said that, Junhop stopped himself and growled, didn't he care at all about the residents, no matter what happened before. Targeting civilians that have nothing to do with your past is not a good thing either. Then, if there are people who have hidden the truth from your eyes, why don't you go find those people and blame them? He just stood still like that listening to him talk. The people of this city have done nothing wrong. Actually, it was Jong-hoo's words that were correct. He did not appear, but through Junhop's words, he screamed at Se-young and earnestly begged that we did not ask for forgiveness but repeated it once again. The residents of this city of Seoul did nothing wrong. Please show them your mercy. Please give the city of Seoul back to its people. This immortal cameraman was present filming all the developments from the moment Se-young declared war on everyone, so it was strange that this young man was not moved at all by the words the Prime Minister had just said. He just stood there and moved his lips, saying a single sentence, meaning that Jang Jong-hoo still refused to appear, right? After speaking, he let out a loud roar, shaking the earth, because he was angry that he had to stand here and listen to a long nonsense essay from these two guys screaming at him, when all he needed to do was meet Jang Jong-hoo. Even in the Parliament House, everyone still felt the terrible weight of his words. Se-young just stood there warning, if he insisted on not appearing, I would not stop. Every word seemed to penetrate Jong-hoo's head. If you know that this country wants to protect him, I will destroy everything until he appears. Stammering on his own words but letting the Prime Minister speak, he wanted to ask if you must meet Jang Jong-hoo? No, he definitely corrected that sentence, I would have to kill him. Neither the Prime Minister nor Jong-hoo on the other side could accept the reason why he insisted on doing so. Pointing at the person opposite, he growled, Jang Jong-hoo, you're the one who knows. The old man's expression now showed that he knew what Se-young was talking about. Sure enough, he continued, the reason my parents had to be cornered was because he gave the order, no one else came in here. Again, saying that, Se-young's dead eyes looked like she had returned from hell, making Junhop take a few steps back in fear, while Jong-hoo gritted his teeth in frustration. Finally he roared, stop behaving like a child, there's no need for face right now. Jong-hoo banged on the table and stood up cursing, even if you do this you won't bring your parents back to life. Of course it was a horrible and unfair death for his parents, but it was not the fault of all the citizens of Seoul or this country. The Prime Minister instead conveyed Jong-hoo's words loudly and clearly to Se-young. He did not say a word but let him continue to express. Wouldn't you feel better if you killed everyone and made them endure you? Would you feel happy if you turned this whole country to ashes or something? Having said so much without missing the main point, Se-young gritted his teeth and didn't say any more. He raised his big hand high as if he was giving a speech during class, but actually it descended at an extremely fast speed with its current target being the ground right under its feet. Stop talking nonsense, he slammed his arm down once, causing rocks and soil to fly everywhere, smoke and dust billowing into piles right in front of the Prime Minister, leaving him stunned. The entire Parliament's vision now had no focus at all, they could only stare and wait until they saw Se-young's lightning sword appear. He reached out and grabbed the sword and repeated, "I told you, let me kill Jang Jong-hoo, and if you want to protect him, the entire country of Korea will become my enemy." He braced himself on the sword and locked it to let everyone present know, "If you don't want to die, just try killing me, or he and the entire Republic of Korea will see the end. Where is mine? This is the only way to end all of this, do you understand?" His declaration penetrated everyone's eardrums one by one to the point that even people far away without TVs could still hear it. The figure wearing an orange shirt stood on the roof of a building, looking at the burning city of Seoul over there, muttering to himself. Words like that sounded less cool when spoken in a low voice. Se-young's statement was broadcast live on all social platforms, but this guy wearing an easy shirt didn't have time to watch it, because he was busy begging for his life. Shi-yeon didn't care, she fired 2 shots from her silencer at that person without even turning around to look. Keeping her nose buried in her phone, she mumbled, "I know right away, Jang Jong-hoo definitely won't come," then turned around to ask Boza, who was tiptoeing as if trying to find a way to get out of this place. She nodded and called out to her sister. "Ah, where are you going? Really, you've been with me for so long and still haven't begun to realize what the current situation is after killing all these easy people?" In the center of Seoul City at this time, only the Prime Minister was left facing the crazy Se-young, and a person far away under the pale moonlight heard the words he said. Holding out his cell phone, he dialed a few numbers on it and brought it to his ear. He heard the person on the other side ask, "Why haven't you left yet?" Laughing, he replied, "I'm preparing to go, but I have to meet that kid before I go." Dean asked softly, "Do you mean Tak Se-young?" He replied, "Yes. You also heard what he announced through the screen. What's more, he said he would kill everyone." It moved on to other things. Dean just felt very surprised by the real reason behind this man's actions. Standing on the windy deck of the ship, he said indifferently that the person who had hidden his entire whereabouts for so long had suddenly appeared at this time. The person on the other side corrected him, "Don't be mistaken," causing Dean to listen silently. "There is no reason for me to do this, it's just for my sister." Standing alone on the roof under the windy sky, he continued to complain, "Are you guys no longer the same as before? I've given you so much time and still can't find a girl." Currently from Dean, the only information he knows is that his sister may have lived as another identity, but if she wanted to keep her secrets hidden, it would be extremely difficult to find. "But stop doing so much for me, you guys were the ones who found me and asked for help." Dean talked for a while then asked again, "Is it possible that your sister has already gone abroad? If so, we need a little more time." The other person interrupted and said no immediately, "That girl is definitely still in this country, because she is very different from me, unlike me. She loves this country very much, that girl also likes it. Stay close to people." Raising his hand to the sky as if he wanted to grab the moon above, he guessed that the girl must want to live a life like a normal person, so he deliberately erased his old identity. But what if Tak Se-young keeps threatening like that? She will come back no matter what. Tightening his fist, he told Dean that, "I just want to protect the life that my sister still wants." "That's strange." Dean's voice was full of wonder on the other side. "Why do you have to find your sister? Just let her live a normal life, okay? Well, that's how greedy people do it. I just want to meet her just once." Saying that, he boredly swung his legs back and forth in a circle, then lowered himself from the roof of a building dozens of stories high, landing on his back without carrying a parachute or anything to land with. "The target is the ground below, just drop down with a bang," while smiling and still talking to Dean on the other end of the second. "Once I find her, if she doesn't want to see her brother, that's it, that's all." Crushing the phone in his hand, the man put a wicked smile on his lips, correcting his previous statement, saying, "I will bury everyone with her." After finishing his sentence, he sped away with completely inhuman strength, leaving only a stream of white smoke in the middle of the city. On the side where temporary President Se-young had also disappeared, leaving behind a cracked road, and Junhop held his head in boredom with both relief and tension after he had just escaped death. He swung on the helicopter again. No one knows where he went. In the cold National Assembly room, a person casually approached Mr. Jang Jong-hoo in a soft voice, held out a file, and said, "The late director of the National Provincial newspaper asked me to upload the content." Putting it on the table in front of Jong-hoo, he said they said this was the way to face Tak Se-young, so they wanted to bring it to him to take a look. As soon as he opened the black cover, there was only one piece of paper inside that made Jong-hoo strain his eyes. It was simply an information card for two people, a man and a woman. The first person, named Cha Jun-yun, is 16 years old in the National Planning Department, codename Loyal, with special skills such as assassination, infiltration and elimination. While the person below has the same last names as him, named 15-year-old Father Aram, alias Guardian, her skills are a bit different, which are high siege, causing chaos and covering Finn. According to that innocent person, the government can be sure that Cha Jun-yun is dead, but Cha Aram has not been officially declared dead. At that time, both of them were on a mission together. Then Cha Jun-yun died while on duty, leaving only Cha Aram to announce his retirement. Jong-hoo listened silently as the other person continued. Now a man named Jang Eon-young just appeared here. That's the person who gave me this document, so he must be a very important person. So Jong-hoo wants to meet that person right away. And this middle-aged man wanted Jong-hoo to read this document before meeting that person. With a very cautious attitude, he whispered to Jong-hoo, "I am afraid that what he will say next will make you extremely confused." In the end, no matter what he would face, Eon-young was called into the National Assembly room to talk to Jong-hoo. On a small boat gliding in the middle of the Han River, a young man with glasses stepped forward to call Dean. That person didn't seem surprised at all about Tak Se-young's strength. He turned around and said, "Yes, we can mention that person and Tak Se-young are the same type of monster. At least the type that makes anyone who has seen them extremely wary." He was surprised and honestly asked, "Can I ask you a question?" Having agreed, that person immediately expressed dissatisfaction. No one knew how Tak Se-young got that mysterious power, but about those two people, he completely knew they got their power from where, right? That question seemed like something extremely sensitive, making Dean ponder for a long time. Finally, he blurted out the name Cha Shin-cap, making the glasses-wearing man ask again in wonder. It turned out that it was the person who lived high in the mountains raising the two brothers alone. That was one of the people who created the temporary government. Of course he had never heard of something like that all those years ago, but he still disagreed with what Dean was saying and questioned loudly. "But I heard that the pair of brothers made the government group of the time that point collapses." "That's right," Dean didn't deny it, keeping him quiet. "I and the leaders of that group were saved by another person, and that person was Maruchi, and that was also the time when Din had two long scars. Ran on his face until he was old at this point. As for that guy with black hair and orange shirt, no one knows where he wants to go, and no one can stop him." In the large working area of the U.S. government, which is separated by metal plates, there is a room reserved for Pan and Se-young's aunt, who is sitting hugging herself and trembling. "Listen to Mr. Doctor say, Miss Randa, your nephew, who is in Korea right now, is in a very difficult situation, as you saw Mr. talk from the video in front of you." Hearing the mention of her nephew, Hin-jin immediately hugged her chest and trembled. Then she looked at the video shown in the room and saw that her nephew had completely changed from the last time she saw her face. Part of Pole's words can be trusted. There are many countries currently targeting Tak Se-young, so I want you to listen to what we are saying. Hin-jin nodded to show he understood, so Pole continued, "We will take every possible measure to protect the safety of Corinder's family. Mr. Tak in Korea has known what our government can do. We are very capable of providing safety measures for him." Looking at the woman on the right and seeing that she was still shaking, Pole frowned and told her one more piece of information. Mr. Tak was currently occupying the South Korean government palace. Out of breath, Hin-jin raised his head to listen to him continue to tell the story. Due to the threat, the Korean government and their army along with 10 million people of the city of Seoul are currently trapped inside the city. Seeing Hin-jin put his hand to his mouth to cover his sobs, Pole calmly told me to come to Korea a few days ago and talk to Mr. Tak personally. Seeing her pause and wanting to listen, Pol continued to tell that he was very concerned about the safety of Coriander and his family. Even though he is facing his own battle, he still asks us to take every possible measure to protect her and her family. Seeing tears falling on Hyunjin's face, Pol held his head and said in extreme pain, Mr. Tak now has to take care of himself. Even though he had cut off contact with the outside world since he was very young, the more Hyunjin talked, the more he held his face and trembled in pain for his nephew. So this is the right time for Pol to immediately come forward with consolation. There is no one who can help him better than our government. Placing his hand on the little woman's shoulder, he continued to speak. Ensuring the safety of her family along with Mr. Tak. I have a small request. Hyunjin raised her face and sobbed and agreed immediately. No matter what the request is, I will do everything for Se-young. That's what Pol wanted to hear, he said with a small smile. Our request is very simple. Please convince Mr. Tak not to stay in Korea if you hope to come to America anymore. The situation in Seoul is currently extremely chaotic. Initially, it was Tak Se-young who caused this situation, but the increasing violence on the streets was not his doing. The leader of a gang and all that rose up to plunder, causing a once very developed place to become a battlefield in just a few days because the residents felt they could do whatever they pleased at this hour without having to pay for it. I have to worry about being busted by the police. Poor pilot Han Ji-hun looked at the scene before his eyes until his mouth twitched. In just 2 days, violence has sprung up everywhere. Public theft and vandalism in commercial areas gradually creates a picture where the strong oppress the weak, and the weak oppress the weaker. Se-young hung on the plane, looked around the city, realizing that at times like this, human nature is clearly revealed. He strained his eyes to look down below where a circle of people stood on the square surrounding a few people inside. 2 people were joining forces to use a stick to hit a guy in a white shirt enthusiastically in the face. Suddenly, they heard a loud explosion behind them. Rocks and soil were thrown up, causing them to panic and turn their heads to look. Unexpectedly, something that collided with the ground more than 30 meters away could still create such a terrible impact. Coming out from there was none other than Tak Se-young. Many people who had only seen him on television were now filled with surprise when they saw the youth idol in person. Instead of running away in terror like last time, these young men clasped their hands tightly, shouted loudly as if cheering for football, not fearing a famous murderer and terrorist throughout the country. They called Tak Se-young's name continuously, their faces filled with excitement. Han Ji-hun on the plane didn't understand anything. We were this happy just seeing Se-young? He didn't understand why these guys were screaming his name. He just glanced towards the center of the crowd where the white-shirted man had just been beaten to a pulp and was dropped to the ground. The 2 guys who assaulted him were smiling happily when they saw Se-young. Then the guy with glasses and a cut head identical to Nobita smiled and greeted him like a longtime friend meeting again. He was our hero. Thanks to seeing him we had the courage to stand up to protect ourselves. Look at this guy, we are killing all the people who tormented us before. If it weren't for you standing up, we would definitely have been beaten to death. It turned out that the people who formed the bullying circle were all people who had been bullied before, and the guy in the white shirt who was punched enthusiastically was the bully. It was thanks to Tak Se-young's courage that he spread the inspiration. For them, he didn't want to get involved in this and simply said, I've definitely told everyone not to go out unless there's a special reason. The other guy was still laughing and asked with joy, what are you talking about? You're the one who led us. The group of people behind him followed in agreement. You were the one who killed all the people who bullied you. If that's the case, why can't we also kill the people who bullied us? They smiled happily like villains and asked Se-young with excitement, you are the one who understands our feelings best and right now, no one else comes in here. We are people who are abused every day for no reason at all. Just like when he was in middle school, people beat and ostracized him so much that even eating was worse than being beaten. No one appeared to save us alone and no one understood the suffering we had to endure. It was you who knew how miserable and humiliating it was. How's that? Se-young opened his mouth and remained silent for a long time before speaking. Before he could speak, he suddenly heard a joking voice from behind. It sounded really ironic, right? In an instant, Se-young turned around with his fist, making the space seem like a whirlwind was passing by, creating a terrible wind. But the other guy escaped easily just by jumping back to avoid it. Go some distance and pull yourself up on a nearby colorful pillar to avoid Se-young's attack. He observed Se-young from the top of the tower in a posture that couldn't have been more unusual, then raised his eyebrows and laughed. Oh Lala, don't be so angry so quickly. Se-young didn't know who this guy was but had that attitude towards her, looking at him with eyes full of contempt towards her. He raised his eyebrows and questioned, well, why do you have to feel embarrassed about that? Do you feel like something is wrong? Se-young didn't answer. The other person glared at the crowd below. Even though I understood what they were saying, don't you think there's a problem with your mind? Just raising his eyebrows couldn't stop the other guy from continuing to speak, but if he admitted that he was wrong, it would be the same as accepting that what he did was wrong. Instead of being an idiot and coming to advise him, Se-young angrily clenched her lips and then rushed out of the place where she was standing with her fists clenched, wanting to punch this damn guy in the face. Let him keep his mouth shut. Yet that smile was still flashing before his eyes. Maruchi happily asked, did I hurt you somewhere? Where Se-young's fist fell, a wave column several meters high rose up. People outside looked and didn't know what was going on. In a faraway place but still in the city of Seoul, Sangpul raised his phone to listen to the person on the other side report. Everything was done where he had gone. Just past the final control touch. There was no need to worry anymore. Behind him were a bunch of people listening to the conversation. Shinjin Group has already sent someone to help us. Just follow the predetermined route. The person on the other end of the line stood in front of the pickup truck. Yes, let's go now until it's hot. Hanging up the phone, Chongsu's father Sangpul turned back to inform everyone that he was almost there. Behind him were 3 men wearing formal suits. Sitting in the middle is Su-yun's father Lee Jo-jang, head of the Shinjin Group. The tax department director sitting on the right is Hee-won's father Nam-ji-I-jong, who wants to know if that thing can really kill that monster. Ho-heen's father, the general director of Goodfin Company, spoke next to him. People say the only way to kill that guy is to use a bomb with the power to destroy an entire city. How can that thing of yours do any business? No? Sangpul did not rush to answer but stood looking at the city outside the window, not turning back, but his voice was loud enough to be heard from behind. Don't worry, I have to kill that guy to die, then I will burn that guy the same way I burned his mother. Speaking of that, Sangpul's right hand suddenly clenched into the sight of the men behind him. Jo-jang just wanted to ask again, you know what you're doing, right? Back in the replay, Sangpul affirmed that of course it was. I didn't kill only that Tak Se-young guy. I will let the bomb fall in as large a range as possible in the city, because those useless government people are not there. If we can't protect our innocent sons, just kill all those dogs. Jo-jang continued with an equally resentful look. Our white phosphorus will kill a lot of people. That old man Jang Jong-hoo can't solve any problems. If he committed a crime, he should be punished. Jong-hoo, who was being mentioned by those men, looked at the person next to him and asked, are you sure everything will turn out that way? Yeon Young on the other end replied firmly. He could think that these people had the same strength as Tak Se-young. Jin Suk's voice on the other end added worriedly, but if it was that strong, what would happen? If we can't control it, what if another problem arises than the one we currently have? The former prime minister seems very certain, if we cannot control it, of course things will be worse than they are now. But if we find this person and bring the Maruchi project back, things will definitely change. Looking down at the document labeled Top Secret, he continued, but because this project has not yet been completed, I propose to proceed in secret. We will find that person in secret. Now eliminating Tak Se-young is the top priority. What happened next, Jong-hoo really wanted to hear. He said, we worked in secret for more than 30 years. Then you will see how much this country has sacrificed. Then everyone will see the opportunity to make Korea the most powerful country in the world. The streets of Seoul were beaten up countless times. According to reports, Tak Se-young and Maruchi met. It was the guy from Se-young's side who was reporting that they were fighting 5 kilometers away from Myeongdong. The other side's commander said they were only approaching to pass on information because the fight between them seemed intense. As soon as he replied, I was at a safe distance and immediately had to quickly dodge aside when someone's punch flew towards me, causing the rooftop to fly into pieces. Looking back at the deep hole created by the attack just now, he turned pale and turned around to see that it wasn't just an attack, but Se-young's whole body had flown through at that moment. Using his strong arms to stop his fall. He didn't look like he was hurt at all but seemed to be very angry, not paying attention to anyone around him and just shot away right in front of him to return to the battlefield. Looking dazed and with his legs so spread out that he couldn't crawl, Marucci silently wondered how far he had to be from the battlefield to feel safe. Anyone with eyes right now can see a guy in an orange shirt confronting Se-young head-on with a confident smile still on his face, not afraid of Se-young's tense expression. His right punch collided directly with his left boot. He heard a loud bang and saw it was significantly dented, not knowing if his leg was broken or not. It didn't seem to go as expected. The two collided once more there and then flew out into two different corners, creating a huge pile of smoke. From the right, Se-young blew out the smoke and walked out with a tense expression, trying to find the other guy, but when did he suddenly appear behind him? Even though he was a few seconds late, Se-young's fist was still there. Promptly swung forward, causing the other person to quickly bow down. However, Marucci's movements were too fast. As soon as he lowered himself, he kicked Se-young across the abdomen, causing him to bend over and groan loudly. He saw blood spit out from his mouth and his whole body couldn't stop. Just flew straight forward, creating a long path that blew up the entire field of grass and rocks. It took nearly 2 kilometers to stop completely. Se-young did not lie there but soared high, gritting his teeth as he considered the situation. It seemed much more tense than he expected. Before he could rush to catch that guy, he saw him proactively rushing towards Se-young. With a happy smile, "You're not the only monster, my child. There are more monsters in this world than you think." After hissing that sentence, Marucci rushed straight towards Se-young and collided directly with him in the air, making a fierce explosion. Who would have thought that when the smoke dissipated, Se-young was found unharmed, because his kick collided with Se-young's hard biceps right in the air. His other hand grabbed it as quickly as he could use it. The force went straight towards that guy in the orange shirt. The distance was too close to be able to run, so he had to put his arms crossed in front of him to defend. Surprisingly, his whole body was completely bent when he collided with Se-young's force. That moment seemed to stop for a second and then its body was thrown to the ground with a loud thud, as if it was about to scrape the road surface. The crowd nearby stood there looking dumbfounded without worrying about running away, still watching with open eyes as Se-young's opponent jerked his legs up and then bent over and sat down, fully returning to the battle. Only now I saw spots and drops of blood on the ground. That kick was quite serious. He was more or less seriously injured. Se-young landed from the sky a few dozen meters in front of his opponent, then used his fists to rush forward at breakneck speed with clear bitterness in the eyes of Marucci on the other side, not shy either. What? Just like that, baring his teeth and rushing straight towards Se-young, the whole city at the center of the battle roared with each other. Se-young's thick arms could only block one kick. They both stopped for a second when they realized the opponent's strength was equal to their own and that attack caused them both to bounce away. An extremely long stretch. Using his strong legs, Se-young stood still, at the same time as Marucci over there was breaking. Then they both glared at each other as if they were eternal opponents, not just met a few seconds ago. Gritting their teeth again, they rushed towards each other in the same way that when they meet each other it's hard to leave. Neither of them cared one bit about how many moves they had fought. One specialized in punches, one specialized in using legs. They continued to slap each other, with wounds appearing on everyone's faces. Blood was flowing out of the corners of their mouths, proving that the other person's strength was not average. Se-young felt that something was wrong. He jerked his right arm down, causing Marucci to realize that he seemed to be controlling something. Indeed, the sword danced in the direction of Se-young's pointing and rushed from the sky, preparing to crash down on one cheek. Marucci's was swollen. He saw dirt and rocks on the road flying everywhere as his sword crashed into the ground. Are they there? Se-young was shocked to realize that something was trembling underneath his sword, but it wasn't because it was crushing Marucci's body to the ground. but because he was using his two big, strong arms. He braced himself on the sword to force it to shoot upward. Because it wasn't until the weighting got too close that Mauchi discovered it, so he strained to break all the tendons on his face, and with an extremely horrifying scream, was able to use his strength to kick and pinch the weighting and dancing back. Again in the sky. Next, he kicked his foot down on the road, causing Maruchi to lift himself up to the level of the lightning sword. When he was less than 2 meters away, he did a beautiful somersault, used his right foot to collide directly with the sword's hilt, then grabbed and kicked the sword straight back to its owner like kicking a ball. The sharp lightning along with Maruchi's power rushed towards Se-young, causing him to quickly raise his hand to block it, not simply waving his hand to be able to easily command the sword like before. Se-young, strengthen yourself to command that sword not to betray you. The thunder feather had time to stop before the owner's hand was not too far away, but the force it created was enough to make the air behind Se-young look like it was being blown up by a giant three-pronged fan. It continued to move a little further until it was a few centimeters away from the palm of her hand and was then locked by Se-young's strength. Successfully controlling his sword, Se-young waved it aside like a powerful assistant. Maruchi landed and looked at the big guy with the giant sword next to him and praised, "I almost died. So your special ability is that sword, right?" Sitting on the helicopter alone, Han Ji-hun's hand holding the steering wheel was trembling. Because he had just witnessed two monsters fighting each other with hundreds of moves below, no matter how he looked, Maruchi was no different from the type of monster people often depicted on television. Every time they punched and kicked each other, the road below exploded, making extremely loud noises. Even his helicopter didn't dare to get close. Suddenly, at the corner of the street, the sound of an engine was heard. Several trucks lined up from another road, turning onto the main road and heading straight towards the place where the two monsters were fighting fiercely. Ji-hun looked at it with suspicion. These cars were clearly private, so he guessed they weren't sent by the army, but what was wrong with them? Tak Se-young was right around the corner fighting, and yet they came here, parked their cars and they all looked like they didn't want to live anymore. Are you guys really going to die or something? While Se-young and Maruchi were fighting without paying attention to the world outside, they formed long lines according to the command of the commander in Aegis uniforms and spread out everywhere, firing guns simultaneously on both sides. Road. At first, Han Ji-hun thought this was the part used to fight Tak Se-young, but in fact they were attacking the group of civilians who had gathered together to bully that guy. He screamed in surprise, "What are those bastards doing? Why are they shooting civilians?" Having said that, the pilot suddenly stopped when he saw the roof of the white truck gradually opening at the command of a soldier waving his hand. Because he was an army soldier, Ji-hun saw it and recognized it. What is the extra stuff inside that they carry in tons of trucks? Next to where Se-young and Maruchi were still fighting passionately, he had just received a high-quality kick from Maruchi. When he clasped his arms and swung his body back, the sword Loi Vu, following Se-young's command, ran parallel to the road in the opposite direction of Maruchi's running feet. It turned to where he wanted to cut off those legs but was easily avoided, using his flexible legs to counter Se-young's oncoming arms. The two of us then punched and kicked him, colliding violently in the air for a second, enough for the two of us to feel the other person's terrible power and then fly away immediately when the place exploded with a loud bang. Throwing out in opposite directions, Maruchi staggered a few steps, then braked on the asphalt, raised his eyes to look at the enemy in front of him and smiled happily. But at this moment, he heard rustling sounds in the sky before he realized that the Thundervu was rushing towards him, crashing into the ground. Successfully avoiding it, Maruchi immediately smiled and rushed towards its owner to counterattack. Anyway, that sword followed Se-young's instructions. If he could defeat him, Thundervu certainly wouldn't be able to attack him. Who would have thought that with just one glance from Se-young, Tan Loivu lifted himself off the road and swung towards Maruchi, who was preparing to collide again with Se-young. It appeared right on the teenager's muscular arm before his fist fell on Maruchi's face. Ji-hun flew his helicopter to find Se-young to warn him immediately, no matter who it was, if they didn't leave the city, they would all be killed. We have to be quick because what was just pulled out of the white truck had identical round molds, from which the yellow warheads emerged. Now I understand why the Aegis Company had to transport nearly a dozen trucks. White load, because each one was fitted with 2 sets of these modern artillery shells. A total of 10 were heading towards the road where the other 2 were fighting. As far as Han Ji-hun knew, once that thing opened fire, many innocent people would die here. In a rush, Ji-hun suddenly cursed, "Damn it. Why is Tak Se-young alive or dead so important to me? Remind yourself, Tak Se-young is a terrorist against this country. If you are a terrorist, you will be killed anyway." Hands tightened on the helicopter's steering wheel. Han Ji-hun adjusted his mind for a long time. Then he realized the bitter truth that it was not because he did not understand. And if my parents had left me in the same situation as what Se-young was in, it's not certain that I wouldn't have been mentally distorted like him. So he gritted his teeth and cursed the green beans. He sighed for a long time, then ignored all the arguments he knew, piloted the plane towards the road below to search for those 2 tall figures, just when it was time to stop. Artillery shells on Aegis vehicles were ordered to explode. A few kilometers away, Se-young was holding his sword and rushing towards Maruchi without any weapons but just using his feet to directly confront his sharp blade. As soon as Se-young put his strength on the sword, Maruchi realized he was playing stupid. Putting his foot on it didn't stop him from being able to fight back, but the young man whipped him so hard that he shot out a distance and hit the window. The glass of the high-rise building above heard with a fierce sound. Maruchi felt his body ache as he landed in an office on the upper floor, when suddenly, his hand placed on the floor felt the floor echoing with cracking sounds. At the moment he felt the vibration from under his hand, the lightning sword rustled from below, cutting across the right upper back. It was not being controlled remotely but was in Se-young's hand digging into the ground. Up to slice Mauchi across the body. He quickly retreated to a corner, then braked to keep a reasonable distance from Se-young, then used that place as momentum, returning immediately to Se-young with his legs raised and kicking him straight in the face. As soon as he placed his foot on Se-young's face, Maruchi immediately changed his foot to give another blow to the teenager's face, who was now a distance away from him, laughing in defiance. The 2 compared more than a dozen moves in the building, causing it to resound, causing violent explosions and the sound of broken glass, which soon turned into destructive holes. The horror is punching holes in the building. With a bang, the top of the building was cut diagonally by an extremely sharp sword that without even looking at it was obvious that it came from the power of lightning. The building took several years to complete, but now the roof has collapsed to one side and crushed it, from which 2 silhouettes flew out, chasing each other fiercely. Maruchi smiled like he was about to catch Se-young, but he raised his sword hilt to block his punch immediately. Once again, due to the fierce collision of the 2 streams of power, the 2 people shot back to opposite sides, far away from each other. I don't know how many more times the match will continue like this. It's clear that this is a war. War is equal in strength and without strategy it is difficult to win or lose. The part of Maruchi's back that was slashed by lightning was bleeding profusely, and the scene on the other side of the road was clearly visible. From that deep hole, suddenly there was a sizzling sound and the flesh felt like pieces of melted rubber reconnecting themselves. Then in an instant the entire cut was reconnected as if by some ingenious doctor. Just sewed it. The scar ran along his shoulder blade, leaving a trace and then gradually disappearing. Although Maruchi was still bleeding from his mouth, thanks to his body healing itself, he thought he could confront Se-young more and more rounds. Suddenly he heard the sound of the helicopter flapping its wings overhead. Maruchi raised his head and suddenly suggested to the teenager in front of him, "Hey, why don't we take a short break, then come back to play later? Is that okay?" Before he could finish his sentence, he saw Se-young's silhouette approaching him, less than a meter away with a lightning rod in his hand slashing hard at Maruchi. He was surprised and almost broke the right side of his face, but luckily he dodged in time. That blow was like all of Se-young's strength. When the tip of the sword hit the ground, the road surface cracked and revealed the shape of a giant tree. Not hitting the target made Se-young angry and Mauchi furious. Having said that, if we don't stop, we must fight each other until the end. The 2 crashed into each other noisily at the street intersection, which was also when Han Ji-hun drove the helicopter and discovered that they were down there at the same time, when he didn't know how to attack them. When he was close to Se-young below, he jumped up into the sky above, so the pilot took the opportunity to call out, "Hey talk Se-young. Get out of here, white phosphorus is coming." Se-young dropped out of school in 8th grade, so how would he know what the hell white phosphorus is? He stared at the pilot for less than a second when he heard loud bangs not far away as the Aegis Company's artillery shells were released from the barrel. Laos rushed towards Se-young, specifically the entire area below his feet, and while in the air became an easier target than ever. Se-young's eyes quickly discovered that those things were peeling off the outer metal shell, revealing a black interior covered with red spikes. From there, it did not explode but emitted a series of rays of the same color, some curved, some straight, shooting down at the targets below. Han Jo-hun was scared out of his wits. He closed his eyes tightly and screamed loudly while Se-young, stupidly, opened her eyes wide, looking intently at what was coming down at her. Using the sword, he fanned it in a circle to create a mobile shield, bringing himself closer to Harry Hun's helicopter, whose tail had begun to burn when the thing collided with it. When Se-young's arm was touched by that thing, it immediately caught fire like someone threw a lump of alcohol at it. Obviously, these white phosphorus particles were released with extremely small sizes, so Se-young could only turn his sword to avoid the front. His limbs were not so lucky. Immediately when he touched them, they caught fire. At first it was just her arms, then her thighs also burned fiercely. At that moment, Se-young felt a terrible pain spreading through her skin. Han Ji-hun's screams next to him became more and more urgent as he lost control of the helicopter and crashed into the street below. Struggling to resist this white phosphorus is not the way. Se-young gritted her teeth and thought to herself that she had to find a better solution. Desperately shaking the rod in his hand, Ji-hun wondered if the engine had melted or not. He cursed in all kinds of languages and then bitterly realized, in the end, he couldn't can do anything useful. The helicopter kept heading straight towards the road ahead. Seeing death coming so close to him, Ji-hun stopped trying to hold on to the control stick and started screaming loudly, closing his eyes tightly to wait. A tragic death is coming to me. But strangely, the helicopter stopped without seeing any collision. Ji-hun slowly opened his eyes and saw that his arm was still intact. In front of him was a sea of speckled flames on the asphalt road, but it was clear that he was still alive. The pilot immediately looked east and west and discovered that very close to him were a pair of legs engulfed in flames. To be more precise, Se-young's whole body was engulfed in flames, but he carried Ji-hun's helicopter on his shoulder to catch it before colliding directly with the ground and exploding. Looking at Se-young's condition, he knew he was not okay. Ji-hun panicked and called the boy's name, but he did not respond. He was still suffering under the phosphorus that burned his body, and there were many rounds of phosphorus bullets were flying again. Every time they got quite close to the target, they would explode red lines, and Se-young also realized that her body was about to burn. The city below was engulfed in red lights and black smoke rising from the road. Se-young endured the pain. Her big, strong legs rushed out of the falling phosphorus stream at a fast speed possible. Ji-hun endured the intense shaking while sitting in the helicopter and heard how many people were screaming in pain as they passed through the phosphorus rain falling on the road. Se-young saw and heard it all. What's happening on the street? How many people are struggling in the flames? Because he didn't have tough skin like his, he had been dead for a few minutes, or more than a dozen people were rolling around in the sea of fire with no way to escape. Cries for help filled with suffering and pain continuously rang out around them, making Se-young grit her teeth even more, trying to run even faster. When he was about to rush out of the phosphorus sea, he flexed his arms and threw the entire helicopter out of the influence of the bright red light shining down. Ji-hun also followed the plane and flew out of the attack range. The helicopter did not explode, but just slid about a few dozen meters, then stopped completely. It stopped completely, but the pilot was still sitting inside, cowering, thinking he was going to die. When he realized he had escaped death, he turned around and saw that the whole street from houses to trees to people were all on fire. It seemed like no one could extinguish what was burning him, and neither could Se-young in there. So, The scene before his eyes was like hell, and that big teenager was taking each tired and miserable step to fight the pain on his skin. Ji-hun called out his name in panic, telling him to quickly run out here. He immediately put all his strength on his legs before his clothes were burned and rushed out of there. Just as he was about to leave the phosphorus's range, he heard someone's extremely familiar but desperate voice calling out to him, "Se-young." He braked and looked back in the direction he had just run out of. Ji-hun didn't understand why he kept staring when he should have escaped as soon as possible. Se-young's bewildered eyes did not give the pilot an answer. Because in some miraculous way, he heard his parents' voices calling Se-young right in that sea of fire. His huge face suddenly turned back to that of a middle school child, breathlessly calling out, "Mom, Dad." Before his eyes is now the image of his parents getting married and self-immolating to seek justice for their son. In the middle of a sea of people also burning nearby, he opened his mouth without saying a word, then tears flowed in greeting, spreading one by one down his cheeks. Immersed in pain, Se-young tensed his whole body, roaring out an earth-shattering scream full of pain. He let the flames lick his skin and roared like that. Even when it was about to burn his eyes, he still stood still and released all the pain that had been in his chest for so long. That afternoon, the news station reported that this was an image of Longjong Strait captured by a television station from a remote-controlled aircraft. The MC's face was extremely confused when she informed everyone that the weapon that caused this scene was confirmed to be white phosphorus. "We are very concerned about the spread of this pest." She bowed her head to greet the person not far from her, called Professor Kim, to find out more clearly what white phosphorus was. The first question is whether white phosphorus is classified as a weapon or not. According to Professor Kim, white phosphorus is actually a weapon that can cause ignition. It is the most terrible weapon that can burn human skin as well as major organs and bones in the body in just a few minutes. In addition, this is a chemical weapon that produces a toxic gas that can lead to instant death just by touching the human respiratory tract. It is a weapon that has been banned since the GERNEVER agreement was just signed. Professor Kim shook his head helplessly. "I don't know who is responsible for spreading this stuff, but whatever the reason, using white phosphorus is a very bad thing." The MC seemed to have the same opinion, so she nodded in agreement with him and then told everyone the news. According to reports from residents who are currently unable to escape the city, white phosphorus attacked the Longjong area for 10 consecutive minutes. Her eyes seemed to avoid mentioning that thing had burned civilians and their bodies by the hundreds. Also, according to this source, Tak Se-young was attacked by white phosphorus bullets, and although he tried to avoid, his body collapsed in the fire of this weapon. It's clear to everyone that Tak Se-young was the target of this phosphorus attack, but whether it was a government order or the army and police on the moon, we still haven't determined who was the one who gave the instructions. It seems that the accusation that Tak Se-young is intentionally massacring the city's residents using white phosphorus is not credible. Until now, the government, under pressure from the press, has continuously affirmed that they had nothing to do with the recent white phosphorus attack. Hundreds of victims were killed by that round of white phosphorus bullets, so no matter who ordered the white phosphorus attack, the people still blamed the government for revealing its incompetence that led to the events of today. Today, there are continuous waves of mourning for those who died due to attacks by white phosphorus, and public opinion has also begun to arise that the government and military agencies should limit their actions. Extreme against Tak Se-young because of concerns about similar events arising in the future. The government side is becoming more and more desperate as public opinion is currently criticizing the damage caused by Tak Se-young in the past, little by little putting pressure on the government, forcing them to continuously publicly apologize. People are indignant, because current public opinion has formed the idea that this responsibility is caused by a complacent and incompetent government. A week later, although there was no more white phosphorus fire, the Longjong neighborhood was severely damaged and no one saw Tak Se-young appear again. The government now uses the slogan of taking back the capital for large-scale military operations mainly using Air Force. But once the people heard the news that Tak Se-young had disappeared and saw soldiers pouring into the city, they did not stop making sarcastic accusations against the government but continued to maintain their previous disdain for the government. Was given Every day, the question about Tak Se-young is being discussed by more and more people on social networks. There are rumors that his body was melted by phosphorus fire and can no longer be found. There were also people who said he was seriously injured and taken for treatment somewhere, or that he was disabled due to an attack from white phosphorus. There are also the latest rumors that Tak Se-young has completely disappeared and will never appear again. And the person closest to Se-young at that time now sat down, chewing on the dry back and sighing deeply. Maruchi appeared behind the door and asked, "Is it delicious, looking like this?" He smiled and guessed, "Maybe you prefer to eat dried fish?" Suddenly asking made Han Ji-hun so angry. There was nothing else to eat but that thing to ask. No matter how he looked at it, he hated it, but the pilot didn't dare to object. He just looked at that big guy. The person sat on the chair and wondered, why did this guy save us? Look at that calm face. Han Ji-hun remembers that time when he stood confused in front of the sea of fire, not knowing how to run to save Se-young when he saw that his entire face was covered in fire, and he didn't have a fire extinguisher in his hand. But I've also seen what fire does to other people once they get involved. Ji-hun was confused at that time, not knowing how to put out the fire before his eyes. Suddenly he saw Se-young's opponent approaching him, holding his sword, frowning and looking at the pilot with a puzzled look. Thinking that this person is also a monster like Se-young. At one look, Ji-hun was scared and took 2 steps back, but Maruchi only looked down at Se-young's burning body for a long time. Without saying a word, he swung his leg as if he was about to kill him, but he unexpectedly stomped down hard, causing phosphorus flames to shoot out to both sides, leaving behind Se-young's naked body, which had almost been extinguished. Run out of. Ji-hun was shocked when he saw that scene. With just one kick, could he extinguish the fire? Se-young's skin is currently full of deep burns, but it seems he is not dead yet. Maruchi rubs a hand on his chest, then easily carries that huge body on his shoulder. Looking at the pilot, Maruchi coldly said, "If you don't want to die, then follow me." At that time, Han Ji-hun had no other choice. He frowned and finally